Hey, welcome back to another video and a new series. I'm basically calling it Developing It with Crimson, but it's not an actual full-fledged name. Basically, what I'm going to be doing in this series is working on systems or models and other things, and I'm going to kind of show you the process as to how I do it. Luckily enough, I have the time to actually make these kind of videos now, because my streaming schedule changed, gives me a little bit of freedom to do these kind of things. But for today's episode, I wanted to work on a ladder system for Ronin. A beautiful ladder system. One where you can seamlessly just interact with the ladder, climb up it, or fall down from it. Something simple. Now, before we get into this video completely, there's this new legal thing that's happening with like a kid thing on YouTube. So I'm going to try to alleviate this so I don't get sued by saying one special word very quickly. Fuck. All right. Now, we should be good. We're in the safe, I think. We'll see. Unless I get sued in like the next 3 months. Let's start working on a ladder system, all right? Let's start jotting some stuff down, figure it out. All right, it's in my task list. This is step one. We're good. This is step one. Now, let's try to jot some things down as to like what the ladder is gonna do, and then we'll go from there. Now, the reason that I'm actually making a ladder system is so the player can kind of go from a wall run into like a ladder state. Because typically you're not supposed to be able to go from a wall run into a wall run super easily on the same surface. That's a bug that we're actually going to be fixing in the near future. So something that would be cool is having ladders that you can kind of run up on in certain places, especially near like a fire escape or something, so you can go up into the fire escape and then quickly run forward or go up on top of a building. And it kind of gives us some freedom having a ladder. I don't really know how I'm going to go about doing it just yet. How I'm thinking of is you interact with the ladder and you quickly attach to it, and then we could play some animations from there, and you're kind of doing like a different movement system where you could just go up and down. I'm also thinking maybe we could have like a ladder where you can go on both sides and kind of flip around it. Luckily, I do have an animation for that. I don't know how good it looks. I don't know if this system would work well, or maybe if it's like too complicated. Maybe I should just make it so you could just enter the ladder from one angle, and that's it. But I think it would be cool, it would make sense if you can enter the ladder from both sides, because it's a ladder, unless it's like on a wall, which then we can kind of maybe put in the system that you can't go on one side of the ladder for bug purposes. I don't want the player to just all of a sudden go inside of a wall, even though the ladder's on the wall. So, we're gonna have to figure that out. That shouldn't be too difficult, though. All right, well, there's only one way of doing this, and this is by just getting straight into it. I'm going to quickly create our first blueprint so that we can start working in it. I put everything into, I think, prefabs in terms of these kind of systems. We got things like zip lines and jump boards and our fence doors in here and all that kind of fancy stuff. So I think this would be the best spot to put it. I think being organized is very important. All right, please keep this in mind when you're working on game development stuff. Be as organized as possible, because you don't want to start flipping through 50 million folders to find your stuff. It sucks. Trust me, I know. All right, so we got our actor. There's literally nothing in it just yet. What I'm going to quickly go into is I'm going to go into Blender, and we're going to block out a very simple ladder. We're not going to do specific like spacings, because the animation is going to be relatively like important, because we do want to kind of have the player climbing on specific little intersection points, or whatever you call it on a ladder, you know, the little metal beams that connect with each other. Right now we're just going to make it so it's there, and then once we're further into the system, we'll actually make the player properly hang on those beams. That's a detail thing, it's a polish thing. I don't think it's that important just yet. So let's get this model going, and then we'll go from there. Now, the important thing we want to remember is that we want this to be modular, in that sense being we can stack this on top of each other super easily. So I'm trying to stay within our grid, and I'm also kind of setting it to a player size, which should work relatively well. We could probably half this and turn it into a half piece, and that would probably work easier. So I think we might actually do that. All right, I think this is good enough. I honestly don't think we need to make it more complex. So I'm just going to export this as is. I'm going to zero out all of their scales and rotations. And the reason why I'm doing that is so it has a clean import. You never know what could happen, honestly. You could be trying to import something and it breaks and you don't really know why. So always having this stuff kind of clean is a good thing to do. However, this does kind of destruct a few things because you might have some scales that you might want to keep. So keep that in mind while you're doing this kind of stuff. All right, so we have our ladder static mesh. Now we're going to go on ahead and import it real quick. And we're going to see how it looks. I have no clue if it's the proper scale. All we want is kind of just the look of it, and then we can kind of go from there. We just want to get the base of it down so we can start working in blueprints and start, actually getting this going. I'm going to turn on collision, and then we should be good. We're going to see how this works. This is going to be very interesting. I've never made a ladder system in my life, so you're on this journey with me. All right, we've got a ladder. It looks like a ladder. That's about as far as we'll go right there. It looks like a ladder, which is good enough for us. Now, all we have to do is start getting a system going where we can attach our player to the ladder. So let's work on that next. All right, so here's how I'm thinking of doing this system. I am thinking of adding a box around the ladder that you can quickly kind of walk into and start having the ability to interact with our ladder. Now, how our interact system works is it's utilizing an interface, and basically, whenever you click the key to interact with things, it'll check whatever you're colliding with, which is probably not the best thing to do. I think if I were working on a first-person game, I would just make it a line trace to see which direction you're actually facing. But in this situation, it's kind of more freeform. Our player moves around a lot, and we want things to be relatively seamless. And interacting with things, having to look down at it is kind of annoying. So we're using a box. Basically, what I'm going to do is whenever I want to create more ladders, I'm going to probably use a instanced static mesh, and I'm going to duplicate the mesh upwards, which means we can have taller ladders. And while we do that, the box is going to kind of reform and change its scale depending on how far the ladder is going. So that's how our system is going to work. It should work well in theory. So let's try to get it going. All right, so I have basically made it so we can scale up the box and give us enough leverage in our ladder. The next thing I want to do is essentially make it so we can multiply the ladder and how far up it can go. This is the next step. In doing this, I might have to change our origin for a box, but we'll see. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a variable that is public and making it, or not public, but instance editable. And instance editable basically means any instance of this ladder in the world, you can edit it and kind of change its values without changing other values in the level. And this means that we can have ladders that are different shapes, or not shapes, but different levels, and that's the great thing. So whenever you're trying to make stuff that you want to place in the world and you want to have different things, use the instance editable thing, which you could just enable by pressing this eyeball in the variables section. So let's quickly turn this into an integer, and then we're going to get this implemented, and we're going to see how it works. All right, looks like that's working now. I didn't have to divide it by 2 for some reason, so that's pretty weird, but it's working. That's all that matters at the end of the day. There are certain things that I do because I am an artist by default. The things that I do where I look at it and think, okay, it's working, but how? All right, so since this is an interface, I'm going to quickly just slap my interaction interface on here, and that will allow us to actually walk up to it and interact with it. I just need to call our event interact with object and go from here. This is pretty easy. Just to do some debugging, I'm going to do a print string to make sure that we're actually trying to interact with the ladder. This is relatively important. So far, it would appear that we are not interacting with the ladder. It's a little broken. I think what I have to do is I have to add, this is something I did because we have a bunch of interaction objects and stuff, and to make sure that it's not confusing itself with other things, I essentially have to add a tag to it, which is interact sphere. Now you're probably wondering, why is it sphere? Well, because most of the things were spheres to begin with when I first started this system. So now we can see in the top left corner, we can see hello, which means we can now start working on us actually attaching to the ladder. Now that the overall system is actually interacting with it. This is where the juicy stuff comes in. Now, things that I like to do to kind of keep myself organized is I'm going to make a custom event for this, and then I'm going to slap it into the interactable or the event interact with object. And this way I can kind of keep things neat, separate things wherever needed, because I don't know, I just feel like it's cleaner doing it this way. I also was thinking, I don't know if this would be interesting, because I know Tomb Raider, the old Tomb Raiders had this kind of system where you had to hold a key to hang on to things. I'm thinking, what if we make it so you have to hold E while climbing the ladder, and if you let go, you can start just falling down. I'm trying to think if maybe that would be a good idea. Let me know down in the comments if you think that's interesting. For now, we're just going to make it a one-time press, and then you can just detach it by pressing E again. But I think it would be super cool if we made it so you have to hold the key, kind of like you're holding on to the ladder, which is something that Tomb Raider did. So, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. I feel like a lot of games do that nowadays. I think Jedi Fallen Order had that as well, where you had to hold a key to start climbing around on objects. So we'll see if that works well. For now, let's just try to get the system going. Now, the reason why I'm casting the character is because I want to change our movement mode. Whenever we're doing things like running on walls and all that kind of fancy stuff, we actually want to set the player as flying. And the reason why we're setting him as flying is so we don't fall to the ground. How I'm picturing it in my head is that the player gets set to flying, attaches to the ladder, and kind of gets restricted in terms of where they can move other than up and down. So we're probably going to do some fancy, attach to this normal and go from there. It shouldn't be too complicated, but we'll see as things go along. All right, well, this is a step forward. Now we have to add a system where we are essentially getting the player is at the top, and then we also should probably make it so the character's rotation isn't dependent on where we're moving, because as you can tell, that is a bit of an issue. So we're going to quickly fix that up, and the way we do that is we get our player character movement and we make it so it doesn't orient to rotation or orient to movement. That might be different for your game, so I would kind of look into that yourself and see if you need to change a couple things there. All right, I fixed a couple things. We had some sliding going on, and we're not trying to make an ice skating rink on a ladder. What we're trying to make is a ladder. So what I did is I changed the set plane constraint from, I think normal was what it was before, and I changed it to vector so that we have the forward vector and up vector of our ladder. So now we got that all going, which is nice. I also made it so we stop our movement immediately, and I did a bunch of fancy things in here because I had an issue with one of my other systems that was overriding our set orient rotation to movement. So I fixed that really quickly. Now remember, I'm really early into development, and we don't want to be nitpicky with being super clean with everything. Instead, we kind of want to get things in as quick as possible. Of course, making it readable. That's very important, because once we get back to this and start cleaning everything up, we want it to be readable so we can actually understand what's going on. In our case, though, we're good. Everything's okay. I'm making it relatively clean so I can look at this again and fix up and improve it. So I changed that so we can stop movement immediately. Now we don't have any sliding if we get to it really quickly. We just go straight up and down on the ladder. The next thing we'll have to do is set our location perfectly so that we can go up and down it. And also the other thing that we want to do is make it so once we're out of the ladder, we actually remove ourselves from the animation. So I think what we want to do is probably get our box and do an end overlap and go from there. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. That being said, I do want like an animation that we can do once we're at the top of the ladder. So this is going to be a bit of an interesting system. I think what we may have to do is do an event tick. But let's try to avoid that for now. I think what we're going to do is do an on component end overlap, and then we'll try that out. We'll see how that goes. All right, so here's the exact issue that I knew would happen. That's me holding spacebar, but if I'm not holding spacebar and I reach the top of the ladder, as you can tell, we're not able to go up. So what I'm gonna have to do is once we reach the top or end, I'm obviously gonna have to check if we're above the ladder or at the very top. We're gonna have to make it so our character is kind of propelled forward, kind of getting a little bit of a boost. You know, we're kind of pushing the character up. Because right now this doesn't really work too well. So that's the next thing we're gonna have to do. I have no idea how we're gonna do that. I think like my thought process is basically we'll play an anim montage once we're at the top. It'll check if the player is at the top, and then from there, it'll push it forward. And that shouldn't be too hard. I should be able to use our mantle animation and kind of go from there. For now, I'm just gonna make it so it does it without having to, you know, check if we're above or not. All right, it is working for the most part. We might have a couple issues where the ladder multiplication won't work depending on how tall or how short it is. But for now it works. We're just gonna have to change it up a bit in the future. Basically, oh wow, I'm getting so many errors. We're gonna have to figure that out later too. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm getting the extent of the actor and I'm multiplying it by 1.9. Now, if you remember, we had to multiply this by 2 because the box extent was just half of it. So what we're doing is multiplying it by 1.9, which is just giving us enough and a little bit of leverage so that we're climbing on top properly. Then I'm getting the location of our player and the location of our actor and kind of minusing it. And what this does is kind of normalizes it. So instead of us getting the location of where it is in the world, we're kind of just turning it into a 0 to 0 kind of situation where instead of it being like 5,500,000 and something for the X, it's going to be just 30 or 0. And that way it kind of cleans things up and we don't have to do things depending on where it is in the world. Instead, it's just depending on where the actor is and where our character is. So that's relatively important. Keeps things nice and clean. Now, we're getting a bit of an error here, which is getting none for the player character, and it would appear that it's on the on ladder. Now, what we can do to kind of fix this up is just get on, convert it to a validated get, and that way it's getting if this is valid or not. If not, we're just going to kind of skip it. This is a bit of an issue. This means that we might encounter some problems in the near future. If need be, what we'll do is we'll do a loop that kind of makes sure that this is working properly. I think what might be happening is that this player character is somehow getting reset every time that we attach to it, but I don't think that's the case. That shouldn't be the case. We'll have to see if that causes some issues in the future. We'll have to keep this in mind when we're working with this. All right, so I had a bit of an issue with our branch there, which was just getting if we are more than 0. And of course, if we're doing that and it's just getting false, it's always going to go through and deattach our player from the ladder. So instead what I'm doing is I'm comparing the float to 0, and that way we can get if it's more than or less than. And that way, that should work a lot better than what we had previously. So we could just kind of compare it with 0. Of course, we're not doing anything when it is 0, and 0 basically means we're not going up or down or moving forward or backwards. When we're moving down, that means we're clicking S. So let's quickly check if that's working. Let's find out. We can go up, and then if we click S, it is instantly bringing us off the ladder, which might be a little problematic. I think it might be in how our function is set up. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we got a bit of a problem. All right. So what I did off, camera, I changed this all into a function to make sure that this is working correctly. And also to clean it all up because I don't want to have the same thing happening again and again. So what we might have to do is if our character is, less than a certain value, instead of getting the actor bound Z, we should be able to just get our player location and kind of go from there and check if it's less than let's say 100. Let's see if that works. All right, that seems to work pretty well. I think that's not too bad. I think I'd say that's pretty clean. Let's say I go up and then go back down. Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's solid. Yeah, that's real solid. It's like right at the bottom of the ladder. Now, I did notice a little issue where we were popping off the ladder at times. What we have to do is we have to make it so our character is aligning itself with the ladder. That's another thing we have to do. And I did talk about that earlier, I think. If not, that's my bad. That was something I was planning on doing, but I was planning on doing that once we're in the animation system. But for the most part, it works. It's just one of those momentary things that happens. Now, it seems like we're getting another error, which is it can't reach our player character in the branch here, which is weird because we fixed this, or so I thought. All right, well, it's not a game-breaking error. It just seems like it's one of those little errors. Of course, you still want to make sure that you're, having everything all good to go, but it should be fine if we don't have that in there. I think what the main concern is that whenever we deattach the player from the ladder, maybe what we can do is we can check if the character is valid to begin with right here. If not, it won't matter. But it's just the fact that we only want to check if the player is on the ladder right here. What we can do is we can cast to our player character and do it from here. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal, so I'm not too worried about it. The only thing I'm really worried about is the fact that this is happening multitude of times. And it's deattaching the player like 3 times, which isn't really good. So I'm going to go on ahead and do our cast too. If the cast fails, which it shouldn't, this will probably happen 3 times anyways. So we shouldn't have an issue. But if we do notice there's problems with this, we'll definitely fix it in the future. All right, that looks like it's working. We're not having any issues anymore. We're probably going to get more errors down the line, but we'll definitely fix those things in the future. For now, it's not that major. It's not like it's a game-breaking issue. So that's all that matters. Once we do finish this up, though, we're going to clean all that stuff up so we don't have any issues when we package the game, because that can cause problems when you have those types of errors. All right, so now that we have our ladder, the next thing we have to do is route our player towards the ladder, basically right here, and then kind of go from there. This shouldn't be too difficult, but what I'm going to do first to kind of show on the video, and then I'll route the player off screen. Routing is not that difficult. You just have to do a timeline and then kind of just change a location towards probably like the forward vector of the ladder. Now in the future, we do want to make it so we can go on both sides of the ladder, and that's something that's super advanced, and I don't really want to do that on screen because it's a lot of trial and error for doing that. But all you have to really do is kind of just attach the player to the certain spot on the ladder and then kind of go from there. It's not too difficult. You also have to set the actor rotation as well so that it's attached to the specific rotation on the ladder. What I want to do right now and kind of show off is how we're going to go about making it so our player is actually playing an animation and kind of getting where our hand is on the ladder, making it a little bit more visual rather than us just floating up and down. So let's quickly go into our animation blueprint and figure out how we're going to do that. All right, so here is our main concern for our system. What I want is I basically want to be able to set the player up in a way where we can have left hand and right hand movement on the ladder. And that way, we kind of have to do some fancy stuff. What we have to do is we have to check if the player is on their left hand or on their right hand. Right hand being above the left hand being above the right hand. But you know what I mean. So what we have to do is we basically have to have an enum that will track which hand we are kind of currently handling, and then kind of go from there. I think what we're probably going to do is we'll add a enum in our animation blueprint and kind of adjust it from there. This isn't like the actual animation we're going to be using, but oh man, this actually could have been really good for our vaulting. Really, really good. Actually, I might have to use this later. What we actually want is this animation, which we're going to end up changing in the future. But what you can see is there's this one dominant thing, which is one hand above the other, and we kind of want to check which hand is actually above the other, so that we can stop the animation at a certain pose and then continue it to the next one. So we're probably going to end up using this. What I want to do is I want to have notify sections. I'm probably going to use sections to get this going. I don't know if I'm going to use a montage, but I do know for sure I need sections in here. Thing is, we might be able to actually use an anim montage for this, but I don't know if I want to use a montage for this. What I could do is use a montage for the climbing itself, but then the actual pose itself is just going to be an idle pose, and I'll quickly show you that. So this is the left hand idle pose, and then this is the right hand idle pose. So as you can tell, this is kind of what we want to do. We want to make it so we can check if the player is on their left hand or on their right hand, and kind of change it accordingly to where we're at on the ladder. So that's the thing that we're going to be doing right now. All right, so here is how we're doing the basic setup for our animation. I've set up a state right here from our idle, because idle is basically what it's going to blend from. Of course, in the future, what we might have to do is get the jump loop and kind of put it in here, just in case if you're starting from a jump and you're going on the ladder, then it will blend accordingly. But we'll do that in the future. For now, we're just here for the basics. So we're going to get, if we're on the ladder, and all I'm doing is checking, oh hey, are we on the ladder or are we not on the ladder? Something I did, which I don't know if I did that on screen, but I got our character, because I have a character variable. You might have to do a cast to get that, and then I'm just getting if we're on the ladder, and that's setting it every frame. Now, in here, all we're doing is we're playing an animation sequence. So what you can do is just, play animation, grab any of these in here, and then what you want to do is press the eyeball or the closed eyeball next to sequence, and that will expose the pin. And then we're selecting it from our hand on ladder. Now, something we're going to have to do while we are playing our animation montage of climbing up the ladder is we're going to have a notify. And the notify, what the notify is going to do is basically set which hand we're actually using to get up. We're going to do that really quickly. I have a whole range of anim notifies. I'm going to actually slap it in here because it is just using the animation. It's not actually doing anything with our character. So I'm going to go on ahead and create a new blueprint class. I'm going to search up anim notify, and from here I'm going to select and create a new one. I'm going to call this a notify ladder hand switch. Now that's kind of complicated. You could probably change up the name however you want to, but I'm doing that for these purposes. Then from here, we're going to do an override on our function, do receive notify, and now we can kind of play around with stuff. And what this does, I'll show you very soon. All right, so military base doing some explosions, very fun. Anyways, so what I was talking about is you'll see that we're actually going to be slapping this anim notify inside of our animation montage, and it's going to trigger every time that it goes through it. And I'll quickly demonstrate how that's going to work in a second. All right, so here's the basis of what we're going to be working on, and I'm going to quickly show you the last step to getting this anim notify working. What I'm doing is I'm getting the anim instance, which is basically our animation blueprint, and I'm casting to our animation blueprint so that we can grab our hand-on ladder. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to promote this to a variable and then make it instance editable. Again, we can change the instance however we like in the anim notify, kind of similar to our ladder, changing the ladder count, right? Remember that? Yeah, you remember that if you've been watching the video. If not, you've skipped through, which means you're probably very confused. And now, whenever we slap this into our anim montage, which I'm going to create one from anim ladder climb, we can kind of check where we should be starting. Another thing we should do once we create the animation montage is start the montage depending on where we're at. Like if we're starting from left hand, we should probably start from a left hand and then go from there. We'll do that in a second. All right, so this is one of those moments where I'm noticing a problem and might have to kind of rethink what I'm doing. Instead of doing an animation montage, I think it would be better if we're doing like a ladder state, like ladder moving. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to add a state called ladder moving, and instead of having a system where we're playing with segments, instead I'm going to just check which hand we're currently on and then change the start time on the animation. I think we should be able to do that. That shouldn't be too difficult, but I'm going to figure this out. All right, so I found something that kind of improves things a little bit. I made it so our max fly speed inside of our character movement component is 400, and I changed the braking deceleration for flying to 6,000. And take a look. Let's see here. It should look a lot better. Now, the only thing is the acceleration's a little weird. Not as bad as it was before, but still could be a little bit improved. Now, the next thing we want to do is make it so we have a left hand and right hand. So that's the nice little detail when we get going. Of course, don't mind the actual animation. I'm going to get Kyle, our animator, to properly animate it in the future because it's not looking too good. I think the first thing we want to do before we start getting the hands going is make it so that we can actually climb downwards, because as you can tell, we are not. All right, so climbing down somewhat works. Of course, in the future, we want to make it a sliding animation rather than whatever this is now, because I kind of want to make it so you can slide down faster than you can go up. But for now, we're going to keep this just in case you start holding shift or something and you just want to walk down. But honestly, I think most people are going to like it better when you can just slide down very quickly. So that's probably what we're going to end up doing. But for now, everything's working pretty nicely for our ladder. It's just a bunch of details that we have to work on, a little bit of bug fixing and just a buttload of polish. But for the most part, you can get on the ladder and do a bunch of fun stuff. I think the next thing I want to do is make it so when you click spacebar, you can get off of it really easily. So that is something that I kind of want to do. Yes. Other than that, though, ladder works and it's working pretty well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me down below. Of course, this isn't a tutorial, but I'm always down to help other people that are working on stuff. We're gonna work on a bunch of polish on this, but it's been about 2 hours and a half. I'm gonna go make myself a coffee. I hope you have a fantastic evening. I will see you Wednesday. I don't know when we're actually going to upload this, but I hope to see you in the stream. I am streaming Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m. PST. If you're enjoying these types of videos, let me know down below in the comments if you like seeing me working on systems and you kind of being able to eat away at my brain as I talk about things. I'll probably show this off in the next developer update for Ronin. Make sure you check out the website, actually. I got a website working, so if you want to see a little bit more info, there's not much just yet, but a little bit more info, it is in the website at criminalsinc.com. Other than that, I hope you have a fantastic evening, and I will see you later. Okay, so now that we have this all nice and dandy, what we want is to just get our anim notifies going so that we have our hands in place. All that I did is slap the anim notify in here. You could just right click add notify, and then I changed up the variables for the hands according to where they're at. So this being the right hand, this being the left hand. The next thing we want to do is we want to start the climb animation where these are. Now, you can't put in sections in an animation, which kind of sucks. But you might be able to use sync markers. I don't know what that is, though. I've never even tried using that before. But I'm going to use what I know. And what I know is we can probably set the starting rate for our ladder climb. And I'm thinking that will be in the start position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, based off of our hand on ladder, And I'm going to change the time depending on where it is. So left, we're going to start at 0, but on right, I'm going to start at 0.333. And that is the time where we start, you know, walking with our right hand. In fact, it's actually 0.3, so we're going to actually remove those additional 3s. So let's see if that works real quick, and then we'll go from there. Let's see. Let's find out. So we're walking with our right hand. I think I might have actually flipped this around, actually. Wait, let me see here. So this right here is our right hand, and then this is our left. Oh, I did flip it around because I'm an idiot. All right. Now, now the ladder should work. Let's figure this out. All right, here we go. We're walking with one hand. The animation is just really goofy and weird. Okay, wait. Then we go one more. Okay, I think we might have flipped it yet again. So this is the right hand. Let me just double check that actually. That is the right hand. Idle. Let's see here. Idle right hand. So this is left. This is right. All right. That is right. Now let's check out our animation. I think right is supposed to be, or left is supposed to be 0.3 and right is 0. Let me double check here. Climb ladder. All right, so this is the right hand, which is going to be at 0 seconds, essentially. And then this one's at 0.3. Okay, that technically should work better. I'm pretty sure. We just had everything all flipped around. So if I walk up, then we have our left hand, then we have right hand. All right, so things are working pretty well. Actually, it is working as it should. And it even works while going backwards. So now I think something that we can do is actually make it so it sets its location a little bit before we actually grasp our hand. So we could do it right here. And then for our hand switch at the beginning, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna set it up so it's at the end here. And that way we kind of have better blending between the hands. Let's figure out if that looks a little better. All right, so we're just pressing it once and it's switching the hand very quickly. That's looking kind of nice. I think we might want to change the location of this one. It's not too bad. I think we're going to change the location of that hand switch right there, and that should work a little better. Let's find out. Yeah, that's a little bit more snappy. Of course, the backwards is a little awkward, but it's not too bad. I'll take it. That's looking pretty good. Of course, since it is the fact that we're just kind of using flying rather than an montage, if you really want to use an montage and have him snapping exactly on time as to when he's moving around, you'd have to do some animation montage work with root motion and stuff. And you could definitely do that, but since we kind of want a very slick moving system here, we're not going to be using root motion for the ladders. We're just going to simply use our animation system that we have. Of course, the animation looks really weird. I'm not a big fan of the animation, to be honest, but we'll improve that in the future.